And now we're started.
All right.
Hi, this is Experts Talk. That's my radio voice that I don't actually use. And I'm Jen McCown, and today with us is Cindy Gross. Hi.
Hello.
I have known you for half of forever, since we worked on the same floor at Microsoft, and you were my I don't know what to do, what do I do person. And I am so pleased that you're still around and doing cool, good things, and I get to go see your Precon in
Yay.
So yeah, so that's my super duper professional prepared introduction. Hi, what should the viewing audience at home know about you, if anything?
Well, some of you in the SQL family may know me as SQL Cindy. And for many years, I was in the tech industry, 25 years, and worked mostly at first on SQL Server. I started moving into the big data world, helped a lot of people with moving from on-prem to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, a lot of it was about finding what people were afraid of and what their roadblocks were that weren't obvious, a lot of which had to do with relationships and emotions that weren't being talked about, and helping people come to terms with the new reality they were in. Maybe they had to pick up a technology they weren't familiar with. Maybe they were managing a team that was in chaos because, like, moving from on-prem to the cloud, the people you used to have do installs of the software suddenly had either nothing to do or a very different way to do it. The people who did security, for example, couldn't do their job anymore, couldn't do it in the same way. And navigating those changes is something that I now call befriending dragons. So it was about finding the things that are scary or go unsaid, you know, the elephant in the room. And then you use your power of flight, your dragon powers, to fly overhead and find out what's going on, and look at things. In adaptive leadership, it's called a balcony view. So you're looking at things from the balcony or from your overhead flight as a dragon. And you're also looking at it from, what are your internal dragons? What are you afraid of? What's getting in your way? What is your roadblock? And as I worked through my tech career and started thinking about, why am I stuck at a level where I can't get promoted? Why am I constantly being what I would now name as being bullied? But at the time, it was like, why am I not getting along with people on the team? What am I doing wrong that people are constantly telling me I'm doing something wrong? Like, literally, that's what they would tell me. And now I can look back and say that I was being bullied, and some of those episodes of bullying met the definition of harassment according to company policy, according to law, which are often very different definitions. And that's around the time that I decided to go on leave, step away from tech. And then now I'm a coach. So I'm helping other people, especially women, in similar situations. And that is still befriending dragons. So finding those new perspectives outside of us and inside of ourselves. And a large part of that is seeing the systemic oppression, seeing the bullying, seeing the harassment, seeing the racial harassment. We talk a lot about sexual harassment. We don't tend to frame the racial harassment or the disability harassment in this.
It's called, even within those groups, I've heard a lot of times, and this may be out of date, but I've heard it terms microaggressions, and which is very, for me, descriptive, and I like the term. But yeah, you're absolutely right, is we don't ever hear that phrase, racial harassment. That's not a thing. Discrimination, sure. Harassment, no. Yeah. So that's fabulous. That's an outstanding introduction. And as a matter of fact, I never thought to ask what befriending dragons meant. So I'm glad you brought it up. And that's actually the name of your coaching organization, is it not? Yeah. Yes,
it is.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm so pleased I'm recording this so that I can go back over it again and okay, what did she say about this? And it's just fascinating to me how some folks will have a career, I say like yours, but a 25-year career in tech, and come out of it on the other side with lots and lots to say about internals, and somebody else will have lots and lots to say about management, and someone else will have seen the patterns like you do. And me, I'm something else entirely. And so every time I run into somebody who's got this very useful, very helpful, very amazing perspective of just like, oh, I need to sit and listen. So, which is again why I'm really thrilled. I was thrilled to see that you have a Precon at the Past Data Community Summit this coming November, and I get to go. So yeah, so talk to me just a little about that, because there's, as of this filming time, and I want to release this quickly, there's still plenty of time for people to register for this Precon at the summit in Seattle.
Right. Yeah. And you can register to attend online or in person. So if you're going to be at the Seattle Convention Center in November, great. I'll see you in person. If you can't make it in person, sign up online, save a couple dollars, not a whole lot, but a little bit. And either way, we'll keep you engaged in the room. We'll have breakouts. You'll get to work with other people. One of the key ways to break down white supremacy and patriarchy is to build community. And so coming together and working together, especially working together in a way that incorporates terms like gracious space, adaptive leadership. So some of the things I'll introduce during the day, that these are ways that let you sit in discomfort. So as what is generally the world perceives me as a white woman, I've mostly thought of myself throughout my life as a white woman. At first, it was really uncomfortable when people would say, well, you just did that thing. You committed a racism. You have racism in your teeth. And so being able to sit in that discomfort. Yeah. So Jay Smooth created this term. So if he has a TED Talk, and my favorite part of it is he talks about learning to say, thank you for pointing out the racism in my teeth. And so the same way you would say, thank you for pointing out the spinach in my teeth. If somebody says that thing you said, you know, here we are on Indigenous Peoples Day. And if somebody then turns around and says, well, let's talk about tribes, I can say, well, let's talk about that for a minute. So yes, I am a citizen of the Delaware Tribe of Indians. Tribe is in the name.
Yes.
Tribe is the colonially enforced terminology given by the Bureau of Indian Affairs as part of their attempt to commit genocide against my ancestors and to take the land. And so using tribe, it evokes these images. If you think about tribes in other continents or in other parts of the world, or even about North America, you think about people running around half clothed, because the European style in this colder climate was to be dressed from head to toe. And they would go to warmer climates and go, well, these people are immoral because they're half dressed.
Right.
They weren't half dressed. They were dressed very appropriately for the climate. They were
very
dressed
comfortably, I'm sure. Yes.
So I do want to recognize that I am on the stolen unceded territory of the Coast Salish and the Duwamish. I am a citizen of Cherokee Nation, Delaware Tribe of Indians. I am both a white woman and an Indigenous woman. And that is something that I have struggled with, because I accepted the framing for a long time that the government wants to erase society, culture, and wants to erase Indigenous people. And so there's a one drop rule for Black people. Anti-Blackness says if you have one drop of Blackness, you're no longer quite as fully human and fully autonomous.
Right, because white is apparently the default and the thing everyone aspires to. It's not, people.
Right,
it's not.
Right, it's not. And then something that I didn't realize till much later, I'll phrase this politely. I saw a tweet that said, sort of, every time an Indigenous person, let's say, has sex with, that's not the word they use, a white person, they're committing genocide against their own race.
Okay.
And that's the one drop rule going the other direction. So I am trying not to continue to erase myself from my Indigenous heritage while also recognizing that I have white privilege. So that's my Indigenous Peoples Day statement.
Absolutely. And it does seem like such, we've talked about this a little bit before, that it feels like such a tightrope, because there's all these warring things and within, you know, groups that have been marginalized, and I say it that way for a particular reason, there tends to be a fair amount of disagreement. And it's like, that's perfectly understandable to me, because, you know, if you crap all over a people, whether that be women or disabled folks or any other number, it's going to be stressful. We're going to, so I think it's important to at least recognize that the people, you know, the folks that are doing the work, then they're willing to say the things that there is a lot, as you say, of discomfort that comes along with it. I've forgotten his name. You'll probably remember the man that had a Twitter feed and then a book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And I love that as just the front-facing, not identity, but the brand of, when we talk about this stuff, it's uncomfortable, full stop. So I don't know, it helps me to just say, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to muck it up. Other people are going to muck it up. Okay, now we can move forward. So I imagine there's a fair little amount of that potentially in the talk you're planning to give at the Precon as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to talk about how to sit in that discomfort, how to say thank you for the racism in my teeth, or say thank you for pointing out the racism in my teeth. Not
yes, no, I understand. Good clarification.
Right, and we're going to talk about how to apply the concept. So we'll start out. This is a gracious space principle. Gracious space is the spirit in a setting where we invite difference and learn in public. And gracious space enables us to have uncomfortable conversations so that we can work together towards a shared purpose. So we're going to learn some of those principles and we're going to practice them throughout the day. And we're going to start with, okay, so what are your concerns? And I'm going to guess people are going to come and say, we need to hire more people who aren't cisgender white men. Although I'm going to bet nobody phrases it that way unless you've heard this.
Well, I might have, but now I've heard it one, so it doesn't count.
Yeah. And then somebody else is going to say, how do we retain people who aren't cisgender white men? And then we're going to have somebody else who's going to say, my data is biased, or I'm worried my data is biased, or I'm worried my algorithms are biased. So I'm going to guess there's going to be a bucket of those conversations. And I'm not going to answer those questions directly. HR has those answers. There's a gazillion trainings you can take on those answers. What I'm going to do is help you understand, here are some additional tools out there.
Yeah.
They're going to help you truly take that learning that's already out there, to take those HR resources that are already available to you and move forward with them. Don't just sit there and stew in the, well, I need a checklist, somebody tell me what to do, and until somebody tells me what to do, I'm not going to do it. Or I did technically what they told me to do. I watched that training video with the sound off on my second monitor while I did something else. Check mark. I watched the anti-harassment training. I want you to actually create anti-bullying cultures. And so that's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to go through multiple tools to get you to that point. And I will also say, one day is not enough. You cannot come to one day of training. This is a commitment, a lifetime commitment. Once you step onto the anti-racism journey, you will always be on the anti-racism journey. And at any given moment, you will either exercise your allyship skill or you won't.
Yeah. And
by exercising your allyship skill for one group, you may not be exercising your allyship skill for another group. I could be exercising my allyship skill for a Black man that is unfairly imprisoned. And I could also be not exercising an allyship for the Black women he might be accused of harming, for example. So like, what is the way I stay engaged when there's no right answer?
And that brings us right back around to sitting in discomfort, which, I'm so incredibly glad that this has come up as clearly as a focal point for me, because I've brought it up several times, because I'm horrible, absolutely awful with discomfort and will avoid it actually like the plague. And I have, by the way, concrete evidence now of how I avoid the plague, because I'm still masking everywhere I go. But anyway, that's off the point. Sitting in discomfort and how difficult that is. And like, my mom said something very, very nice to me the other day. Not that she doesn't normally, but she said something very nice that I'm very introspective and I look into things and so forth. And I'm like, okay, I'll accept that compliment. Thank you. And even so, it takes me so long to figure some things out. And other folks that don't have as much introspection, it's just natural for us to push back against discomfort. And I think that's why we have such, I say we, but I'll say we, there's such a difficult time kind of pulling people into this and saying, yeah, we really all hands on deck, because instantly we run into, so I made somebody mad because I said the wrong word, or I said it the wrong way, or whatever. And I love what you said the last time I spoke, was something to the effect of, that's going to happen. So yeah, I liked the point as well that a day isn't enough. and I'm really pleased with the idea of coming here and kind of getting a kickstart and an orientation almost. So here's your initial packet, as it were. I'm not promising a packet, people. And here are things that you can look out to, and here's some starting principles. And just, yeah, no, that's, thank heavens that you're giving this, because I've been wanting something like this for a long time. But not to derail. So what people want, and you're not going to give them the answer. And what else do we want to talk about there?
Well, I want to make sure people understand that this is applicable to every aspect of your life, and it is 100% applicable to work. So if you're trying to make a business case for why you're going to allocate this day to a race and gender equity talk, instead of some of the great technical talks that are offered on the same day, I will tell you there is a mountain of evidence about how racially and gender equitable teams, racial and gender equitable diversity across many different levels, boardrooms, leadership, management, individual teams, outperform monoculture. So a monoculture, for example, would be a team that is all white men or all middle class people, or, as often happens in the tech industry, all people that went to the same university, all people that have a degree with the exact same name. And so those are all examples of monocultures. So if you look at some of the studies that show, for example, companies with extremely diverse, racially diverse companies outperform non-diverse companies by about 35%. Gender diverse companies outperform by about 17%.
Nice. And if you put both together, then that's 1 billion %, roughly.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And when you think about things like just hard dollar amounts, there's the Kapoor Tech Center's Tech Leavers study. So people who left the tech industry, they estimate $16 billion a year in the United States alone is lost to people leaving jobs because of unfairness. And if you think about the cost to replace an individual employee, they estimated around $140,000 for a tech company to replace an employee. So if somebody like me is harassed and not enough is done about it, I mean, Microsoft found him guilty of harassing me and a coworker.
Yeah.
And nothing happened to him. Or rumor has it, because they can't tell me, he might have missed out on a promotion that year and had to wait another year for a promotion, but it's unclear. Like,
I have to go get my hanky. Hang on a second. I'm so sorry. No, and I've, again, that being able to see those patterns, which again sounds ridiculous when you're talking about the topic of I was bullied at work and harassed, but like, you know, I had this blind spot to that, and it took, you know, I've been through nothing as severe as that, but I have been bullied out of a professional organization. And it took, again, bless my mom, because I told her the story and she said, do you think maybe sexism was part of the issue? I said, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, what you said about diversity, it seems at this point in my life, almost, it feels like it should be a given that, of course, if you've got a monoculture, of course, it's not going to be as effective as good, because everything we see about the world around us, including actual agriculture, says that if you just do one thing, you're basically just sucking all the resources out and lowering what's produced. And that's with agriculture, that's with the kind of education and experiences, you know, that, again, studying psychology, it talks about older folks who learn something new, like a new complicated topic. It actually slows down the progression of dementia and that sort of thing. And so that principle is almost universal. Like, very rarely do you want just one of a thing. Anyway, that very much resonated with me, is the shorter way of saying that. So yeah, okay. We've got monocultures. I love the business case for racial equity. That's outstanding. Yeah.
Right. And I get a lot of questions about, what about disability? What about homophobia, transphobia, all of these other things? And I will say, first of all, if we're talking about sexual orientation and gender identity, if it weren't for patriarchy, those terms wouldn't even exist. So when we talk about gender equity, we're also talking about fighting transphobia and homophobia.
Absolutely.
And also when we're talking about racial equity work, we're talking about using the work of the scholars in this area, and they all have an intersectional focus. So intersectionality is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw.
Yeah.
And it came out of the idea that there was a court case where a Black woman sued and said that she was being treated unfairly. And the judge ruled against her because a bunch of Black men did not face the discrimination she faced, and a bunch of white women did not face the discrimination that she faced. Even though there was clear evidence that she was discriminated against, she was the only one that faced that discrimination. So the intersection of her gender and her race is what created a set of behaviors against her, a set of, when you think of the white male bars in a system, all the ways that the system is built, because this is typically what a white man in a position of power has done in the past, and they're easiest to fit through if you look like that same person. When you think about the sharp edges on those white male bars, they're going to cut differently on a Black woman than a white woman. They're going to cut differently on a Hispanic Black woman who's transgender and sometimes uses a wheelchair than they are on anyone else. So intersectionality is important. And if you're implementing racial equity work and using the work of these scholars, many of whom are Black women themselves and have that lived experience, you will be intersectional. There is no way to implement racial equity without being intersectional. If you're intersectional, you look at the fact that police kill Black people at a really high rate. They also kill people with disabilities, which by the definitions of most studies includes mental illnesses of various sorts at really high rates. That means that the Black people who are least likely to get diagnosed by the same criteria as white people are more likely to be unhoused because of all the systemic discrimination, are therefore more likely to be shot by the police, both because they're Black and because they have a disability, for example. So intersectionality always comes into play. And if you disrupt racial inequities, especially adding a gender lens to it as well, you will disrupt all of these other inequities as well. So that's why the focus matters there. Also, we have numbers. Companies can collect data on race and gender in a way they don't collect data on almost anything else. And so we can prove the impact we're having when we focus on those. Now, a focus on data in and of itself, I get it. It's a data community. Data proves everything. A focus on data is in and of itself upholding white supremacy and patriarchy.
I don't have a response to that. A focus on data is upholding white supremacy.
In the context of deciding, like, am I going to spend resources on combating this harassment? Well, if you're only looking at, well, we don't have any numbers on how a Cherokee citizen might be impacted by this because we don't have any other Cherokee people. We don't have any data. Therefore, we're not going to spend any money on it. That's letting the data take away from the feelings and the lived experience and the emotions and the things that can't be quantified or can't have a dollar number high enough to meet some bar.
And so, it's one of those things that I've been on root cause analysis for a long time. And to me, I want to quibble just the tiniest bit and say, oh, it's not a focus on data that's the problem. It's the misinterpretation of the availability of blah, blah, blah. It's much simpler and about as accurate to say, you know, the way that you said it. But it's like we were talking about before, how you know, they say variety is the spice of life. I don't think so. I think variety is essential to life. You know, if you eat one thing or one class of things all of your life, you're going to die of scurvy or heart disease or something. And in that same way, to say, oh, well, we have, you know, not that any of you lovely viewers would do this, but just if you happen to sort of forget and think, oh, well, we have data for these two things. No. We need to pretty much include, you know, anybody who is reporting that they experience the same things. And one of the things I kind of get the sense from people that, and this will be my last thing, I kind of get the sense that in addition to I want to avoid what is uncomfortable, there's also sort of a feeling of, yeah, but you know, there's no reality to it for people who are, generally privileged, right? It takes work and it takes looking and listening to bring that home. But a very, very simple example, I found out very recently, I was looking into cars because sometime in the next couple of years, I would like to buy a new car. And I found out or was reminded that there is one car company in the entire world that consistently uses male and female designed test dummies and children dummies. One.
Wow, I did not know that.
Volvo.
Wow.
How it is not an industry standard to not just test for men. I mean, they'll take like a male dummy and then like a slightly shorter male dummy and test for that. And it's like, no, which is which is why fatality rates are so high for women as compared to men in car crashes. Mm-hmm. So that one example, why should I give a crap about, inequality and disparity? It's just that one example, and then extrapolate out from there. It absolutely matters, and it matters to real life people. But anyway, there's my diatribe. Sorry, not sorry, I suppose. But I should let you have the last word, and then ask you a quick question. But what have we not talked about that you really do want people to know? And we're not super limited on time, so.
So I think that first I want to follow up on your example. Excellent example. And again, there's tons of data out there. It exists. And the data in and of itself is not enough. You have to be willing to think about how that applies to everything that you're doing and what's under your control. So most of us in SQL family are in some way having input to the data that's collected.
Yes.
And the algorithms that are built on top of that. Varying degrees of control over one or the other. And we're also at least somewhat in control of how often and how we ask questions about how will this impact humanity?
Yeah.
How will destroying the taxi industry and coming up with 2 monopolies on ride sharing affect people who drive us other places, and how will it affect, for example, disabled people who are often left on the street when an Uber or Lyft drives up?
Disabled people of color, yeah.
Yeah, and people of color as well. And so how does that impact our lives? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it was a right or a wrong decision for people to fund those organizations. What I'm saying is we need to ask those questions up front. What are some ways this will impact humanity, and what are we going to do about it? And if you say nothing, I mean, that's often a valid answer in project planning. Be aware that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm not going to elaborate because I said I was done. So awesome. So, all right. We've got your upcoming Precon. You said that did you say you were SQL Cindy on Twitter?
Yes.
I'm bad at remembering, facts and things. Excellent. And is there anything else that you would like to promote? For example, what's the name, the URL for your coaching business?
All right. So befriendingdragons.com is the website, and you can see more information on there about both the individual coaching I do and the group coaching for race and gender equity and consulting as well. And the Precon, the full day event, is Race and Gender Equity on the Tuesday before the main conference, Race and Gender Equity Toolkit. And then during the main conference, I'm doing a talk on adaptive leadership. So it'll be a more condensed version of the adaptive leadership that'll be on the full day. It'll be a different focus. And in both cases, it will be using examples from the tech industry, but it's something that you can apply anywhere. You can apply it in your volunteer work. You can apply it in your house of worship. You can apply it with your family. Mm-hmm. There are ways to look at it that go beyond tech, and we have to think of ourselves as fully dimensional human beings with fully integrated lives, so that we can also think of other people as multidimensional humans with full lives outside of the interactions we have with them.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. I'm so looking forward to the Precon. That is November, should be 15th, 2022, for those of you watching in the distant future. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cindy. And I'll stop here.
All right, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.